My name is Hanhnhon Nguyen. I am a TV and film writer, and the show that I worked on most recently is called Beef.
Welcome to The Vietnamese. I'm your host, Kenneth Nguyen. Being part of a culture of nearly 100 million Vietnamese people in the world today comes with a lot of pain, proud history, and privilege. Join me as I highlight and explore the Vietnamese experience from all over. Congratulations on the success of that show, and thanks for coming on the podcast, Marie.
Of course. Thank you for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
Wonderful. And we met at Bao Nguyen's birthday party last December, right?
Yes. Yeah, very briefly.
Yeah, very brief.
He has many friends.
Yes. So where did you grow up?
So I was born in Vietnam, in Saigon, Ho Chi Minh City, and I grew up there until I was 5, and then my family immigrated here to Northern California when I was younger.
And as you were growing up, did you have any memory of wanting to be a writer at all?
Yes. I think ever since I was young, I think I always wanted to be an artist. I started out drawing, I think when I was like 4 or 5. And then when I got into school, I was in ESL probably until the 4th grade. And I think once I became more fluent and was able to read more books and watch films, like I knew I always wanted to be a writer in some form. I didn't know that it would be film and TV when I was younger, but I definitely wanted to write.
And what did your parents think of that?
They were always, I think, confused, but somewhat supportive. Like, I think they knew they couldn't stop me. I think like very, traditional Asian parents, they were definitely looking at my other family members. A lot of them are doctors or lawyers, and they're like, what's wrong with you? But eventually, and now they're very supportive. I think, especially as immigrant parents, they didn't really understand this career path. I didn't either, to be honest. I didn't really know about it. So yeah.
Yeah. And I would love to get into that, not knowing about it, because it's like when we don't know about it, how do we get the rest of the community, the youth of the community, to get into it, right? Because like a career path. Because can you imagine like all the Vietnamese parents going, my dream is for you to become a TV writer one day, or right?
I know.
And there's like this career path, and there's like this ABC steps that we can take it. But I think that's like kind of my job nowadays, is to like illuminate what that process is, or like that mode of thinking from an early age. Like a lot of people are like, okay, be a doctor, be a lawyer, which are great professions. But at the same time, now we're at a new place in our culture that we need to get more people like the Maries of the world to be writing.
Yeah. I totally agree with you. I think I was, because I myself was an immigrant coming here. And I think growing up, I knew I wanted so much to be a writer. I loved books. I loved film. I loved probably more film than television, because I was just kind of checking out, watching whatever I could at the library. It's not that I had taste or anything, but I just enjoyed watching stuff and storytelling. And I knew that I really wanted it, but I certainly didn't know how to get there. And it took me, I think, it took a lot of my career and kind of a long journey to figure out a pathway to becoming a writer. I worked in our industry probably 7 years or something before, to get to this place where I could like fully transition to writing. So I agree. And I so believe in like, when I was working as a producer, like created internship programs and outreach, and just like, not even education, but just sharing that dream is possible. And there are ways beyond just, of course, continuing to write, but there are ways to actually break in and make a living. I think I think a lot of Asian immigrants, I think, have a lot of filial piety. And I think, if you don't maybe come from a really secure financial upbringing, the ups and downs, of a kind of freelance artistic job seem more insurmountable. But yeah, I would love to. I think it's really important for me to share with people, like, if you really love this, I think there's a way to do it and have a life that you can be proud of and happy with, I think.
And your community is very proud of you too,
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I think that's what made Beef special, just like the part of Vietnamese representation. That was a small part of it. on
Yeah.
the Ali Wong side. Yeah.
Now, when you were growing up and you leave Vietnam at 5, right?
Hmm.
This was like, I mean, not fairly. I mean, you didn't have to go on a boat. Your family didn't have to. You're probably on a special program like ODP or HO. Your family. So,
Yeah.
can you tell me a little bit about that, like departure when you left Vietnam?
Yeah. So I'll go back a little bit. So like during the war, like my mother's side of the family, they all escaped by boat. My mom and her other sibling had tried and failed several times, and so they stayed behind in Vietnam. My father was in a re-education camp. They hadn't met each other, but he was in a re-education camp for a long time. And so growing up in Vietnam, you know, we I guess in hindsight, we were lower middle class. I think compared to the US, we were like obviously very poor in a developing country. And then when we came here, I grew like probably when I was 5, like we were constantly living on, every year I felt like we would move to different aunt and uncle's couch or something, living with my cousins and families, sharing a pull-out bed for just many years, and then, getting an apartment. And then yeah, so that I think like I remember it really vividly. I still remember Vietnam like probably as young as when I was like 2 or 3. And I think assimilating, not knowing the language, being so isolated as a kid, was really hard. I think it really shaped who I am as a person, how much I value friendships and whatnot. But also, I think in that loneliness, I was able to kind of hide in films and books. And I think maybe that was what, a lot of the inspiration, I think, to pursue this path came from the joy and the solace I found in stories as a kid who didn't know English and had no friends.
Wow.
Yeah.
It's the most, the people who are isolated or sick in bed or, away from the public or these mainstream, kids who are playing sports and, really into society,
Mhm.
sort of sometimes grow up to be kind of like these regular journeys. And then, the kids who are like isolated have this opportunity to really expand a little bit about themselves, understand through reading a lot. And I mean, you hear this all the time, right? These
Yeah.
artists who, had that period of like 5 years or 10 years of their early childhood to really get to form these thoughts in their mind.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it was such a formative time. And actually, now that I'm a working writer, I talked to my parents, and my mom was studying to be a doctor when she was in Vietnam. But I asked her, like, I've learned that, like, actually her passion was she wanted to maybe be a singer, be an actress. My dad was always interested in writing, even though he was studying to be a priest. And I think they just, not knowing English well, but they just never thought it was possible,
Yeah.
But I think in my family, it seems like there is actually a passion for the arts that I'm grateful for that they loved. And I wish that they had. Like, I think I'm only here because I'm not saying it was easy for me, but it was a lot easier than it was obviously for my parents. And so I think, yeah, I'm very passionate about sharing with our community, like what is possible. And that if you do have a dream that is maybe, out seemingly not in the norm, that it's possible.
So let's take it to like maybe around high school, college, when
Hmm.
there's this burning passion to write and you're watching a lot of movies. What point do you go, I got to step up the game and really find a way in?
Yeah. So I have to say in high school, I had no idea. And it was really naive because I was watching films. And I would see the credits, but I really had no understanding of what a director was, like I didn't imagine what the process was. I didn't even know to think about it in a way. Um, and I had actually this English teacher who was like, um, she had told me that she was a writer, that she was a screenwriter, and her whole family was in film. And if I was interested, it was a pathway, maybe think about film school. And so I applied, and that's what sent me. And I got like a scholarship to go to this school called Chapman, which had a film program. And so that kind of was what led me, yeah, down this path.
So this was high school. A high
Hmm.
school teacher said, script writing might be something that you should look into.
Yeah.
You
Yeah. She was
apply.
very encouraging.
So at that point, I mean, I'm just really basic about this whole thing.
Yeah.
You have this idea of becoming a scriptwriter, you watch a lot of movies. Then, in order to apply to Chapman, though, did they have to see a writing sample or anything?
Yeah. I had to write I had to write, I think, a short story. It was very bad. I don't know why they let me in, but I got in. So
Yeah.
yeah.
And
Yeah. But I hadn't read scripts or anything. I mean, we had read plays in school, and I really thought I wanted to be a novelist, but back then, I think the entry point for writers of color, even into novel writing, it just was a lot. I think it's really different now. I've seen the industry, both in literature and film, and like the crossover of the two, really change in my time, last 10 years of working. I think when I was in high school and middle school, it was really different. It felt like every working creative writer was probably white, mostly male, you know?
yeah,
Yeah.
that's so true. That's changed a lot, I'm sure.
Yeah, I think so. And the internet too, has made a lot more possible. I feel like I was growing up right when that was um there was more access because of that. But yeah.
So you get to Chapman and you major in screenwriting or creative writing?
Yeah, I did screenwriting in French. There's a lot of irony there with the French. But uh yeah, I did screenwriting. And you know what? I've never told anyone this, but I actually failed my screenwriting class. I got an F on my
Why?
thesis. Never told my parents.
Well, why did you get an F?
Um, the reason I share this is because so I was graduating early because of financial pressure. Not from my parents, but just because I felt the burden of that. And I want to talk, I think it's important to share this because I think a lot of kids getting into, the industry, especially when you're starting out with these jobs, they pay so little. And so there's a barrier to entry that I think a lot of people, if you don't have, financial support from your parents, it's really hard. And so I just want to share that it was really hard for me. And and it was possible, but like the reason I failed my thesis was because my last semester I was just trying so hard to get a job. That was all I really cared about. It was like I just need to get, I can't have a gap where I am not able to help my family or have no income. So it was between like writing a feature script or trying to land a job. And so I got the job and I started working at CAA. I was an intern and then I got hired there. But it was like that just took over my whole life. And my teacher was very kind. He gave me an extension, but I was still so overwhelmed. Like I wasn't able to um, finish my thesis. So he rightfully gave me an F. And I'm a writer now, but that was like the kind of the bet I took. Um,
That is so ironic to hear this.
yeah, I know. I know. Yeah, and I feel like I'm one of my class, like I think one of the few like working screenwriters now, from what I can tell. Yeah. I'm not saying everyone should fail their classes. Absolutely recommend you doing well in school, but yeah, I felt like I was just back against a wall, and I just had to I couldn't
But
do both.
but there's a moral to the story for me is this. It shows how tenacious you are because in the face of failing a thesis, which is so important, it's vital to graduating, right? In the face of that, you make a weighted decision to pursue the thing that's most important. And then everybody, we all know how important it is to be at CAA, right?
Yeah.
It's everything, almost everything. I mean, because that's when you can really learn and connect with the people that you're going to be, the cohort that you're going to be growing up with.
Yeah.
And to make that bet and to be that tenacious to say, you know what, I'm going to weigh this out. But was it that clear at the time, or was it just like a gun pointed to your head and you just kind of had to like split decision, go, I have to go this way?
I think it was more the latter. I was definitely panicked. I don't think I had a smooth strategic plan. It wasn't like I will give up this grade in order to get a career. But I knew that I was like the job was the priority. That much I knew. It wasn't like I wasn't going to quit the job or not show up my internship in order to finish a very bad feature script. But it was really stressful. I think the most important part was just like if you're trying to break in and if you don't have a lot of financial resources, just give yourself grace because it is
Mhm.
really hard, and just know that you're competing with a lot of people who don't have, those same issues. And if you have to make certain sacrifices, that's okay. I'm sure a more brilliant person could have gotten the A and the job. I was not. I was kind of floundering. But it worked out. So I'm not.
And how
Yeah.
did you actually get to CAA? How did you get the internship?
That was kind of weird. I remember I was just looking for any job. I was just applying online, and I just remember finding an old application from many years ago from a UPenn website. Because back then the CAA like didn't have, I remember their website was just CAA. Like there was no like job links. Like now it's really different. You can actually apply to the jobs there. It was much more exclusive. And I think getting working at the agencies was much more like a game of like, how do you get in? And I didn't really have any connections, but I had sent in that application, somehow got a phone interview, and then I got the internship. And it's really funny because I got the internship and I had graduated. So of like they took some interns who were like maybe in their junior year, sophomore year. So not everyone was at the end of the internship was actually ready to take a job or wanted a job. But I was, and I really wanted it. And I remember in my exit interview, they were like, "You're too quiet, you're too shy, like you're not ready for a job here. Maybe reapply in like a few years." And I really panicked because I was like, "No, you don't understand. Like I need this job." And so, but that I left that interview and they're like, "Sorry, we can't hire you." And of course, as an Asian woman, especially then the culture was very different. But being told that you're too quiet, too passive, etc., there's stuff. Um, and I don't blame them actually. I think their culture, I think they were looking for a certain type of person. I knew on the surface I didn't fit. And so there was like a final lunch, like a goodbye lunch for the interns, and it had all the heads of departments, et cetera, there, and the people who were hiring, the heads of HR. And I just like, I think I blacked out because I was so stressed, but I just gave this speech that made everyone laugh. And after that speech, they were like, "Okay, we'll hire you."
Whoa, 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 whoa. That's crazy. Wait, so what did this
Yeah.
wait, how were you given like the platform to give a speech and like to how many people? Or
It
was
was
it
just
like
no, it wasn't to everyone at CA. It was like come to the intern class and all the agents who were kind of running the program but the heads of HR who I knew were hiring. And it was like, "Oh, does anyone have something to say? Like any last words? Say goodbye, say thanks."
and how many people
And
were in the room?
I don't, my guess is like maybe 35 or something, you know? Not like a massive amount, but still really scary, especially knowing that their
Yeah.
critique of me was like, you don't speak. And so I was like, I have one day left to speak. And so I spoke. And then afterwards, the HR lady was like, "Oh, we want to hire you." And I actually didn't have to even work in the mailroom. They bumped me up to floater. So I didn't have to go through the first like step. Usually, they place you back then. It was more severe. They place you based on how uh yeah, like how ready they thought you were. Like kind of starting the mailroom was like base level training. You were floater. You were a little bit. You got to skip that step, and so I got to be a floater. That was my first official job.
I'm trying to be very careful about causation, correlation all the time,
Yeah,
you know? But goddamn, the one thing that changes the courses of our lives. I mean, this is pretty epic. It's an epic story because, one degree to the left or to the right, and you're at a different place in your life and career, right?
yeah, yeah, yeah. It was very stressful. I still get stressed thinking about it. And
What did you say? Do you remember what you said at the speech? I mean, basically what you said.
I think I vaguely remember. It was some version of like, "I'm really grateful to be here." I really thought like I'm really self-deprecating and I feel like my sense of humor sometimes is not appropriate. But I was like, I remember saying that I thought that I would hate all of them a lot more than I did. And I'm really glad that, I'm surprised that like I ended up liking them so much. And I think that kind of was so against what they had expected of me. Maybe that was it. I have no idea. Maybe it was just the fact that I spoke
Okay.
up at all. But yeah, it was kind of insulting to them, I remember. And I was like, "Oh God, if this doesn't work, doesn't matter. I'm not getting the job." I wasn't going to get the job anyway, so who cares? But
Well,
yeah, it saved me.
and then you go from floater, and then do you eventually get to a desk?
I got on a desk. I started working for this really wonderful agent named Ben Kramer in the film finance department. The name has changed now, but it's basically independent film financing. Yeah, I started working there. I
Again,
went to
completely nothing to do with writing.
No, 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 no. And I knew that CA was not the right place for me. There was no part of me that was like, "Oh, I changed my mind. I want to be an agent." I think if I were savvier back then and had understood like TV as a pathway, I think that would have been a more
Hmm.
clear traditional path. But I really loved film, and so
What were there options open though? That they were like, oh, here's the desk where you can, pick up with the lit agent in TV or film here, or was it like this is what you're assigned to and you got to take it?
it was more of the latter in my case. I think some people, and again, I think it's really different now. I think a lot of people leaving college are just savvier and kind of know how to
Yeah.
navigate. I think back then it was kind of more obscure. Or maybe I was just an idiot and I just didn't know anything. But I got on this. It was like I was floating on this desk, and they're like, "Oh, we want to offer it to you." And I was like, "Well, it's in film, like that's maybe good enough." Yeah, I didn't really think to be like, "Oh, I'm going to hold out for a different job,
Yeah.
or a different desk."
And then all
Um,
this time you're still writing at night.
yeah, yeah, but I have to be again. I say this to the other people out there who are struggling and financially scared and stuff. CA, an all-consuming job like that, and like really time-consuming, really stressful. Um, I wasn't writing well, and I didn't really have the energy to write a lot after work like I wanted to. But those early years of my 20s really felt like just like survival mode of just trying to get through. And so I think if you are able to carve out time, and it seems like that the culture there has gotten better with work balance. Oh, kind of maybe across in the industry across the board for assistants. Um, but yeah, it was really hard. And so it took me, I wasn't writing that much, and it took me a few years to get to a place where I was able to write more again.
Yeah, and the desks that you were at weren't you weren't reading. There was no mandatory script reading, right?
It wasn't mandatory. I definitely got, that was one of the helpful things in terms of access. Like you were able to
Yeah.
get a lot of scripts, or if you were tracking, good scripts, even if your boss wasn't getting it, you could ask someone else to do it. Um, I did read scripts. A lot of them I would say were not that inspiring. But it was just good exposure. And to be honest, like it taught me a lot about how our business works, how representation works. I'm really grateful for that time because I think it has helped me as a writer and a producer to just navigate situations that if you're just coming in kind of fresh as a writer, sometimes the industry side of things can seem intimidating. And I feel lucky that I kind of had that education before.
Yeah, it's the agency route is the education after the education
Mm-hmm.
you have
Yes.
to have.
Yeah.
It's almost mandatory. And
Yeah.
obviously, if you're in the elite forces, like if you make an analogy to like the military, you have your SEAL teams, at the CAA level, and UTA and
Yeah.
William Morris and all these big agencies, and you get to do a few years there, and then you can really branch out and know what the hell's going on with logistics and how these things are put together. Not enough
Totally.
of us are in that.
Yeah. Yeah. I think CA, especially from what I know, maybe I think the other agencies too. I'm not like on top of this, but I think over the years, I've seen diversity and inclusion be a really important, a bigger mission statement. I think when I was starting out, it felt less so maybe, than now. Um, Certainly the content, the things that were getting made, the conversations about diversity and representation now are just, I feel like light years ahead of
Yeah.
what I was experiencing like 10 years ago. Um, but yeah, there's not a lot. I think there's more transparency now, and I think there's more access if you want to seek it out. But yeah, there should be more. And I'm glad to see that the trends are changing.
So, can you walk me through from the time you are at CAA to becoming a staff writer on Beef? Like, what
Yeah.
happens?
Yeah, it was a lot. So I was working at CAA, indie film, learning a lot, great boss. But knew that I didn't want to be an agent. And so like the goal was just to get out as fast as I could. And then I went to Sundance. After that, I worked for Carrie Putnam, the head of Sundance, another really great boss. Um, and I thought being close, it wasn't even that intentional. I just really needed a job. And I thought the nonprofit space was interesting. I thought being, near artists, supporting artists. And I really respected Sundance just as an organization. And so that was a good education, I think. But where what I learned was like I was really close to artists, but if I wanted my day job to be teaching me more, um, to do the thing that I wanted to do. Like I wanted to work for someone. I realized I had to go work for someone who was doing the job that I wanted to ultimately have. Because it felt like even though, you know, CA and Sundance are in our industry, it still wasn't creative per se. And so I felt like it's still my work life and my first, like my creative ambitions were really separate still. And I was like, I need to get a job that like at least better marries these two things. So I started working with this filmmaker named Yann Demange. I started as his assistant and then became kind of his executive producing partner as he started a company. And we worked on the film White Boy Rick together. Then we worked on the Lovecraft Country pilot. And so I learned so much in terms of how to produce, you know, an independent film, but at a scale like, you know, an indie film for around like, you know, in the 30 million range, like that's even like more rare now. So I'm glad I got to see that. Lovecraft Country was a really big pilot. And so I learned a lot. And during that time, I felt much more creative. I felt much more inspired. I was writing plays. I was writing a pilot, and that quickly got me into like programs. Like I got into the Blacklist Women in Film program. I got into a Sundance theater intensive. I was like building kind of my credits just as like a writer, a voice or whatnot. And then the pandemic hit and I was like, I really need to take a chance on myself. And so I quit my job and I had given myself, I had a little bit of savings over like the years of my measly salaries cobbled together. And I was like, I have like practically like a 5-month window to just focus on writing. And if I can't get a job as writer, I'll go be a writer's assistant and get some job, you know, would not put my family in financial risk for all eternity as I, you know, if this dream wasn't going to work out. So I quit in, I think like I ended my job in February. And then by April, I got my first job on Beef. It was like instantly. And then I've been staffing. I've been working back to back ever since. I sold a show with A24 Amazon. I mean, it's been crazy. That's like the past 2.5 years. It's been really nonstop. So I feel very blessed and very lucky. But yeah.
Before Lovecraft and White Boy Rick, did your focus, was it landing on becoming a writer yet? Or were you still in the producing mode and you're like, oh, anything can go, I'm still learning mode?
I definitely wanted to focus more on writing. I also was really interested in directing, but I think that's a longer path and more financially
Riskier.
Yeah. Yeah. And it just takes more financial resources. You know, writing, I was like, I can do this. I love doing this. And it just felt like for me at the time, and again, you know, having to think somewhat practically about the financial part of this job, writing felt like an easier pathway to all of it.
But during the pandemic and you quit your job and everything, and you're like, I got to make this serious switch.
Yeah.
You just can't, you know, people just can't be like, okay, I want to switch and then go on to become a staff writer, like on a big show like Beef. How does that happen?
I think it was luck. I think too, like I got put up for that job. I'm not sure. I was lucky that Sony read my writing. I think I had close relationships with people at A24 who I think helped recommend me. So I think that helped cut through, you know, I'm sure Sonny had a massive pile of people to read. And I remember in the meeting too, like I really connected with his vision for the story, but I think a large part of it, and I'm not embarrassed to say this, was I remember asking him if like, oh, you know, Ali Wong's half Vietnamese. Are you gonna bring that into the story? And he was like, oh yeah, like, because I think that's a big part of her identity. So I was like, I'm Vietnamese, hello. I have no idea if that's why. I have no idea why he hired me, but yeah, it was a lot of luck. But I think I did, you know, all the years I had put in working on our business before, building relationships, getting experience as a producer and whatnot. I think that helped. I think if you are just saying that if you have no experience and want to just quit your job and just try to be a staff writer, I think it's totally possible. I think you can have an excellent sample, whether it's a script, you know, they'll read anything now, a script, a play, a novel, whatever it is, certainly possible. But I actually think I had a really good foundation of support where that jump was less I felt like I was ready to take that risk because I feel like my whole career is just kind of judging like I want this really risky thing, but I can't sacrifice, my family's security or whatnot. So, but at that point, I was like, this is, if there's any time where this was the safest version of this crazy bet, it would be this. So, yeah.
Now, I've always wanted to ask this question, but now I can ask it to somebody like you, which is when you get on a show like this, is there any time where you predict in your mind this is going to blow up? Like the people on this shit, the people on this ship is like mothership level, and this is like the next level people, and this show is going to blow up and do really well. Do you have that feeling when you walk in that portal the first time, or not really? You're just all working hard, and who knows where this is going?
I can't speak to the other writers. I personally, for me, from my perspective, I had no sense that this show would connect. It seems to have connected with so many people in a way. I would say when we were in the room, the ambition to create a really like powerful story about anger, about loneliness, isolation, all of that was there. We wanted, Sony wanted, to do a really bold but entertaining, but like affecting story, and so I think he kept pushing us to dig for the best story we could, and I think that creative freedom and ambition was there, but I don't, and you always hope that like you make something and at least one person who's not your parents will watch it, but I certainly had no sense, and just the critical reception I was really excited by but didn't expect it, because like I felt like there are parts of the show that are risky, that take both swings, like I don't think we were ever going for like the safest version of that story, so I thought might be more polarizing, so it's been really exciting that like people have been so positive about it.
But damn, the polarization within the storyline is what makes it so it draws you in, right? Because
You hope. Yeah.
without that without the polarization, there's no way to connect to and I think that's like in comedy or drama or whatever, like everything that's pushing you it's like edging you to insanity is what sort of drives us in and turns us sort of alive to the material.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that was the hope, but certainly not the or at least I didn't have that confidence, like that it was 100% gonna land. I feel like you never really know. And then once you're done with a work, it's like it's its own thing. It has its own life. And it's out there. And it's cool to see like people responding to it.
Yeah, and then the reason I preface my question with what I said about like I've always wanted to ask somebody, because I mean in the Vietnamese community we haven't, I mean we've gotten a few wins, but this is a big win, having you on as a writer, a staff writer on the show, and asking you to kind of gauge if you could feel the success of this project before it, went live on Netflix, right? So
Yeah.
it's like such a special thing to witness.
Yeah. Yeah, we feel really like it. I mean, I would say like in terms of going into the project, I was really creatively excited by it. Not just Sunny, but Ali and Steven, Netflix A24. Like there were a lot of elements that was like, oh, if there's any chance a show will succeed, hopefully it's something like this, because you have so much support and talent around it. Yeah.
And was Ali and Steven in the rooms when you guys were writing and pitching and doing the work?
No, they weren't. We had meetings with them. They would come in and out sometimes, but a lot of, I think, the creative conversations related to the story with them, like Sunny would have with them. And he was really close to them, and I think they shared a lot of, very personal stuff that made it into the show. And in the room, it was mostly the writers, breaking story and then, yeah, writing.
And how long did it take to kind of like complete from A to Z up until the time that they go into production, or was it all happening simultaneously?
No, it wasn't. It wasn't simultaneous. I think this is quite normal for rooms now, but the room existed. We wrote, as many episodes as we could. We didn't finish all of them, but I think we had broken them and written a chunk of them.
And
And
what do you mean by
then,
broken? So the audience, we can
oh,
understand what that means.
that just means like we had kind of mapped out what the stories would be for, even if the episodes didn't have scripts, we had kind of mapped out what we thought would happen in like episode 8, episode 9, episode 10. Broken the story, quote unquote, I think just uh means like figuring out the story. I can't remember now. It's been like 2 years, but I don't remember if we had gotten through to like the outline stage. Like usually the process is, as a room for the season, you can go by episode, but you break each episode, you figure out as a room what's happening in the episode, and then you typically write an outline for that episode, and then you move into writing the script phase of that episode. And then the script will go through various drafts, the writer's draft, producer draft, etc., as it gets notes. And so when our room ended, I think we had figured out the story for the season loosely. I forget how many we had the majority of the scripts in, and I'm not sure how many outlines we had in, but the room ended, and then Sonny continued the journey and did the rest of the writing and all of that. And then he went to production and he did that
Wow. So it's
himself.
just him to polish up and get it ready for production.
Yeah, yeah. And I mean, we don't have to get into this, but I think that in the old days, I think before a lot of the streamers disrupted the process, I think it was standard for writers in the room to stay with the show through production.
Right.
Writers would go cover their episodes, be on set, etc. The way Beef was structured, which I think happens now with a lot of shows, is the room ends and the showrunner's kind of on their own. There might be a senior writer involved. I don't think there was for Beef. So it just happened to that Sonny, and he had his directing producer, Jake Schreier. Like he had a lot of people supporting him, but in terms of the writing, it was Sonny after the room ended.
It's a lot of heavy lifting. How many
Yeah.
writers was around in the room before it ended?
Let me think. So with me, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. There was about 8. There were some people who were consulting or part-time, or they would some people came in and out, but I think the total in the room was around 8. Maybe a little less depending on like what phase we were in.
So
Yeah.
interesting. All of the back end and how the mechanics work
Yeah.
shows. Yeah. What does it mean to be Vietnamese to you?
But I have to say, not only am I so proud to be Vietnamese, but I think it is, and my family is so important to me, but I think it is a part of everything I do as an artist, and every thought I have, every theme I'm drawn to, every value I have as a person is related to culturally what it means to be Vietnamese, historically what it's meant to be Vietnamese, like a people that I think such a beautiful, I mean, I'm so proud that it is my culture, but we have such a history of, I think, violence and pain and oppression, along with beautiful art and, you know, um, and what our society was before colonialism, etc. And so I think all of that I'm constantly navigating and parsing through as an artist. And I think the stories I'm drawn to, um, the themes that I care about, I know that they are all directly tied to my experience as a Vietnamese woman in this world and coming from a Vietnamese family.
That's beautiful.
Um,
Have you gone back to Vietnam?
I have been back once, and it was very emotional.
What year?
2000, I think 17 or 18.
Okay, it's fairly recent. Mm.
Yeah, and I saw like kind of like the shack I grew up in, and it was crazy.
Wait, what do you mean the shack you grew up in?
It was just like a shitty little. Like the whole street has changed now, but yeah, we were really poor when I was growing up, and just seeing that, and so that's what's been so kind of crazy about this journey. Just seeing um like the rundown house that I grew up in, sleeping on the dirt floors, whatever, and to go from like that's I think what's been so it's something that's been hard for me to reconcile, but I think I'm grateful for it. It's just like having started there, and then now going to like showing up at premieres or Oscar
Yeah.
parties, being around like
Yeah.
the upper echelons in a way.
Yeah.
It's just like it's like an extreme like cultural whiplash.
It's a mind
Um,
fuck sometimes.
yeah,
Use that word.
yeah, yeah. No, it's
Yeah.
and I think that's a whole part of it too. I think that's also what drives me a lot as a creative.
Yeah.
Just trying to process this giant gap that I've, yeah, or the gap between like all these different parts of my identity. But I think being Vietnamese is like um so essential. And I make a point to always like when I introduce myself, I identify first as Vietnamese. I know that I'm technically American, but in my mind, I'm like, I am Vietnamese. And I think it was really important to have when I was, had joined the WGA, they're like, how do you want to be credited? And it was really important to have my true name in my name and my credits. Even though Sony was like, on my episode with my other co-writer, he's like, you guys have the longest names and we can barely fit it on the title card. And I was like, I'm sorry, but it's really important to me. Yeah, make the font smaller. I don't know what to tell you. Um,
Yeah.
yeah,
No, it's beautiful because when I run across that decision, it's a clear decision to me when I see
yeah,
it on screen.
yeah,
It's clear. It's very clear to me. It's like somebody made a decision to spell it out, and it's not easy to make that decision in Hollywood, especially in the earlier years. And now it's not easy, but it's still something that you can still fight for. And you're like, no, I want that. And it's a very intentional thing that I see when I see it on screen. I love it.
yeah. Even when I was in college, my stupid little short films, it was like, this is the name that I need to
Yeah.
put out into the world. And now people give me shit. I'm like, it's the same syllables as Phoebe Waller-Bridge, so you can leave me alone.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I want to go back to that whole shack idea. Like, uh,
Hmm.
the more I do these interviews, the more, again, correlation, causation, I don't want to get into that, but I really do feel like at the root of a lot of our drive, we tap into this place, and there's many levels to it. You spelled it out as a shack. I spell it out as, when I was in the hood, I grew up in South LA or Mid City. We are kind of gifted with that shack or with that hood thing or whatever that place of underprivilege is, to give us the fuel to tap into that gift and say, you know what, I don't want to be there, and I know it's a long distance from there, but it kind of drives us. And I wonder, this is something that I wonder about all the time. Is like, I wonder if the third, fourth generation of Vietnamese, are they going to still have that? I just wonder aloud all the time about it.
Yeah, I hope so. I mean, and I think like, I've heard like, I've definitely seen examples of like, I guess the generation below me, like really tapping into their
Yeah,
culture and their history, really reclaiming it, being proud, wanting to spread it. And I think that's so important. Um,
yeah, of it.
yeah, I think, the work you're doing, like with this podcast, and I will say, like, I've listened to your podcast and the interviews on here many times when I had felt like I missed my community, didn't feel like I had access to it, starting out in our industry. And it was a safe place for me and a place of comfort just to hear, like even my parents' generation, like the artists then and like their struggles to maintain authenticity, and when it was even harder for them. And so I think it is so, yeah, really important. And I think to continue to kind of preserve and honor our culture and what it means to be a part of, at least for us, like the
Yeah,
diaspora. Um, yeah, but yeah, that the groundedness of our shack, our hood, whatever it is, that pain in our past, I think is so essential to what makes us creatives now, or any work we do. I think, yeah, and it's so like it's not that long ago, like my parents' generation, like uh, I'm one generation away from like yeah, that
yeah.
very painful legacy. It's crazy.
Uncles that lived in pigsties, like literally my mom's cousins that lived in pigsties, and we go to Vietnam, and they would show us like the shack that they grew up in, and growing up with pigs fecal matter like next to them. and hearing stories like that and being witness to seeing that, and they're like now CEOs of different companies in Vietnam, and a lot of them haven't left, and they because of that gift and knowing how close to sort of like the brink of really dying and living like that they've propelled their lives to get MBAs and travel outside of Vietnam to get leverage to do business in Vietnam. It's incredible to watch.
I know. It makes me so emotional and so proud. Like, yeah, growing up, like we would hang out with the pigs and my neighbors. Like the pigs would live in their house, like these
Yeah.
giant sows, and I would go sleep with them. I mean, and obviously that's so crazy now, the world I live in now, but I am so grateful for it because I think it makes me, I think it helps me with groundedness. And then, when something comes up in my work, like some deal didn't happen or whatever, I'm like, okay, well, my mom almost drowned in a boat. So if she can do that, I can certainly take this rejection. It doesn't matter. Yeah.
What are you up to next?
Um, it's interesting. I think the potential strike puts into a lot of question marks, but I'm just developing my own writing. I think I'll continue to staff, hopefully work for shows or on shows that are really inspiring. Um, and then we'll see. It's the great unknown, I think, of being a freelance creative.
And are you leaning more on feature or television?
I would love to work more in features. I love movies. I think TV has been I've been really lucky to work in TV. But I'm curious, I think the industry now is in a kind of interesting time. I think a time of great change. I think, especially with the streamers, it feels like there's a lot of consolidation. So I'm curious what the landscape will be like. But I would love to work in both, and I would love to work more in film because I feel like I've mostly worked in TV. My last 2 years is working as a writer.
What about any stories out of Vietnam? Anything, any future of, taking your ideas or stories back to Vietnam and developing anything there?
That's the dream. I've tried to develop like a few projects set there, and the things I'm writing forward are always, yeah, putting Vietnamese people at the center. I think that's really important to me. I have not uh so far in my career not done a lot. I haven't done actual work in Vietnam yet. Um yeah, but that would be the dream.
Yeah.
That's the hope.
Well, we're very proud of what you've done here in the
Aw.
US. Yeah.
It's not that much yet,
I mean,
but one day.
I could tell you, almost everybody I know has watched Beef, and, we see it all over social media, and we see it within our internal text messages back and forth. And we were very proud when, your name came up in the credits. It's just a very emotionally, it's a choking, brings us all to tears. So
Yeah. It's
congratulations.
crazy. I agree. Not my own name, but anytime I see anyone Vietnamese, it's like it's something in the soul, where you're just like, yeah.
No doubt. It has been from the early days in the 90s with 3 seasons. Do you
Mm.
remember that movie? Did you ever get to watch it?
I never got to watch. I need to watch it right now.
That's the movie that kicked off this whole thing. Done by Tony
Wow.
Bowie, directed by Tony Bowie, and his brother Tim Bowie produced it. And they kicked off this whole generation of filmmakers that when we all read about that at USC, I had a few friends at USC. I was at USC at the time, and we all just was like, whoa, how is that possible? And then we went to the premiere, and then some of us started working with the Bowie brothers on the next movie, and they made Green Dragon with Patrick Swayze, Forest Whitaker, and they just started making these movies, and all of a sudden, all this wave of Vietnamese filmmakers started to pop up. Ham Tran, Stefan Gauger, all these Vietnamese brothers, and and women and men were just now coming into the film industry in the early 2000s. But seeing their names up on the screen was like the first time my generation, we were just, oh, what this is. And, they won like 3 of the top prizes at Sundance
Yeah.
the year that they came out. It's just phenomenal to
Wonderful.
watch. Yeah.
And especially back then. I mean, they paved the way, I
They
think,
paved the way. Yeah, they paved the way. They're legends. Yeah,
Yeah.
paved the way for many, many. And nobody could have predicted, like, because they were rep by CAA in the
I didn't
90s.
know that.
Yeah, they were rep by CAA. I still remember
Wow.
their agent's name, Craig. Yeah, we met, hung out a few times, and it's like we had no idea the proliferation of Vietnamese people that was gonna show up, and and I bet you from now to the next 10 years, like you, Irene Tran Donahue, T Ho from Sympathizer, three
Yeah.
of the most recent big writers that are staffed and on these big shows. In the next 10 years, you guys will be, all doing major things in the film business as well, and inspire another group of another generation of Vietnamese young children in the film industry.
Yeah. I hope, yeah, I hope so. I hope it's always, uh, our work can always make it a little bit easier for the people who come after us, you know?
And there's practical implications to all this. I want the grown-ups that are listening to this to know that when we get the representation on screen, whether it's acting or writers or whatever, it translates into money. And I'm not just saying money in the industry, but money for future deals. People, I remember growing up, people were just like looked down on Vietnamese people in all over Asian America. It was like Taiwanese were at the top, and Koreans were at the top, and Japanese were at the top. And it was hard for any Vietnamese to kind of like do anything outside of their own business community. But now it's changing, and it's
Yeah.
changing because there's visibility and there's representation, and we got to push that, continually push that in the entertainment business.
Yeah. I think even the past like 10 years that I've been working, I've seen it change so much, and I hope it can only continue.
Yeah.
Yeah, in this direction. I believe it will.
It is. Yeah,
Yeah.
it is changing. It is
Yeah.
changing. Marie, thank you so much for coming on today. And
Thank you. Oh, no, the honor is mine. I'm very grateful that you were willing to talk to me, and I feel really lucky to be a part of this podcast and the community you built.
thank you, Marie. And then
Yeah.
hopefully we'll catch up soon on the next time, your another project comes out, and can't wait to see that.
Yeah, definitely.
We'll have a wonderful time in
Okay.
Ohio, and thank you for coming on.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for listening to The Vietnamese with Kenneth Nguyen. The Vietnamese is produced by Brittany Tran. Special thanks to Jane Nguyen, Catherine Nguyen, Tina Pham, Sydney Jamie, and Christo Trin. Please find us on Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok at The Vietnamese Podcast. You can also find us on YouTube, where you can subscribe, like, and comment. Please rate and give us a review wherever you find our podcasts.